So welcome everyone to the PatternFly Demo. We have a number of updates. One including don't have my information up yet, including an update from me on the PatternFly 4 timeline. Let me pull up my slides here. All right, I'm going to share this screen. So for the PatternFly 4 timeline, as you know, or as you probably know, we're currently actively releasing alphas. We do have semantic releases, so the milestones are just a means of organizing and coordinating priorities in a group. And that's how I'm referring to them here. But those PRs are made available immediately via the semantic releases. So as I said, we're actively releasing alphas, and we'll continue to release alphas until November is the current plan. And then at the end of the year, looking to do our first beta. And at the beginning of 2019, looking to do probably another beta, and then barring any major issues, come out with a release candidate soon after that. So this is, just to note, this is specific to the core implementation. So this timeline is specific to the core implementation. We are immediately following up core implementation with React issues and development. There just is a bit of a lag there. So I'm estimating currently that lags by about 4 weeks. And so whatever PatternFly React release you could expect about a month after core. So we do have our milestones, I think, as I've referenced in the past in GitHub, but additionally, I do have a spreadsheet that helps to give a more consolidated view of everything that's going on. These are tracking our component work and what's getting delivered when. So I know I've been in communication with a number of people who have already started to adopt PatternFly 4 and might potentially have some needs or requirements around when a component is delivered. But just encouraging you guys to reach out to me if I have not talked to you and you do have specific needs regarding PatternFly 4 and those priorities. But otherwise, you can first take a look at this spreadsheet here, and it will show you the components that we are looking to deliver within each either alpha, beta, or release candidate. They're categorized into groupings, so there's new components, enhancements, docs, and other. So happy to put that spreadsheet in the chat. But yeah, is there any questions on the timeline? All right. And we don't have any interaction design for today, so I'll skip over to visuals. Kyle and Michael will be presenting a couple things there. Hand it over to you guys.
Hey, can you hear me? My activity set resolve connection.
You're kind of robot-y.
Okay. Maybe Michael can go first.
Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm going to share the progress bar design. for PatternFly 4. There we go. All right, so progress bars for PatternFly 4. First thing I want to start with is the spacing, or sorry, the sizing. The current PatternFly progress bars are kind of a step up in sizes from this. So they have a normal size, a small size, and an extra small size. And what I've done here is I've kind of created a small, medium, and large, where our large is the previous normal. And the medium now, 16 pixels, is the previous small, and the 8 pixels is the old extra small, but it's just our regular small. And I did this because I thought the thinner progress bars were a little bit more modern and save space, which is always nice. So just to go over that again, it's 8 pixels for the small, 16 pixels for the normal, and 24 for the large. And I wanted to kind of encourage the use of the small one more. Having it labeled as extra small kind of just feels kind of unfriendly, kind of feels like, oh, like I should save this for time when I really need space. When in reality, I think we can really use that size for just about anything, but I think it's good to have a range here. So I wanted to have small, normal, and large. So the visual design of the progress bar, you'd think it's just two parts. It's the background bar and then the foreground bar, but it's actually 3 parts. So we've got the foreground bar, which is just blue, our primary accent blue. And then there's actually a layer in between that, which is the same blue color at 20%. And you might ask, why not just make that white background bar the light blue color that we're creating? And it's for a couple of reasons. One is that this is hopefully a more systematic approach. So we are only using one hex value for both of these bars. We don't have to introduce a new color into the system for that brighter blue. That should hopefully make it easier to scale out as well for other uses, for other colors. So you'll see on the next slide, if we want to change this bar to red or yellow or another color to indicate a status, or for a different brand, for example, since this is an open source system, you just change that one hex value. You don't have to worry about finding a secondary super bright tinted version of the color. And it looks the exact same. And we've got the white bar behind there in order for it to look the exact same on a dark background as it does a light background. So you can see here, it's the same color effect on a light background as a dark background, whereas if we just had that transparent layer without the white background behind it, it would look a lot different on the dark background and wouldn't have the same effect and probably wouldn't even really be visible. So here's an example of this kind of status colors I was talking about. So we're looking at using turning it to a red color for failing. And you can see there the red color tint applied above, in between the two layers, gives the same effect. And again, without having to come up with a new color and introduce a new color into our system just for this purpose. So for labels, I kept the same exact labeling structures and ideas as the current PatternFly. I didn't see any need to change them. I did change the spacing a little bit, but the overall layouts are the same. So we've got kind of a description on the left and the percentage on the right, top left and top right, I should say. And then there's also chances for the percentage to be right aligned or left aligned for the progress bar. On here, I'm showing it right aligned on the outside, on the bottom. And then also playing around with the idea of having it in the middle of the progress bar, inside the bar itself. I think PatternFly has it left aligned, but I thought it could be cool if it was center aligned, kind of follows the center of the bar as it grows. That's something we're still playing around with and if we can make it work. But overall, mostly the exact same as current PatternFly when it comes to labels. And then, so the Bootstrap progress bar has an animation in it for a specific use case. I think usually when the progress bar might hang a little bit and you want to show that things are still happening even though the bar is not moving. So they have these animated lines that go through it. And we liked the idea of it being animated, but we didn't really think that the animation that they had fit within our visual system. So I went ahead and created these animations of this bar filling with this gradient passing through it. And we think that that fits our overall visual theme a lot better, and it looks a lot nicer. The text animating in and the bar animating in, don't worry about any of that. I just got kind of excited that I got to animate something again, so I kind of went overboard with it. But just the animation in the bar is what you're focusing on, the blue bar. And you can see a better frame rate version of these. I know BlueJeans screen sharing isn't good, but on the GitHub issue, there's a much better visual representation of these animations. And this one, just trying different colors. So the last one you saw was a lighter blue. This one's a purple. And a really bright yellow, just to see how it looks. I think the bright blue is probably my favorite one, just because it's a little bit more subtle, but more noticeable at the same time. And that's it. That's all I've got for progress bars. So definitely check those out on the GitHub issue if you get a chance. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Kyle, are you less roboty?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay, you sound better already, so we'll go for it.
All right. So today I'm going to talk about a few things. One is our navigation system. So specifically around the sizing. So one of the things that we did was work with Andreas from doing the CSS work to figure out what's actually the correct sizing of navigation. So we created some initial concepts and then worked toward refine them once we started implementing. So really this process is applied through all of our patterns that we've created. So we'll create something, try it, and then we have to make revisions based on the actual implementation. So here you can see what we did was we drastically reduced the size of some of the mockups that we're doing, and as a reflection of that, we reduced the size of the actual spacers that we're doing. The spacers are really important because if somebody wants to recreate this or understand where the content goes or how it fits, specifically with the designers or the developers, it's important to have this mockup with these spacers and this sizing all figured out. So this maps exactly back to the implementation. So anybody can come here and see how the implementation is constructed, and then your mockups are going to match exactly to what the implementation is, which is pretty rare generally. So this is going to really ensure that is the case. So one of the things that we did was we changed the size, and it's easier to see zoomed out here, but you can see the drastic size difference. So we reduced the size down by about 80% from what we were doing before. So our mockups were 1920, now they're 1500. And with that came, again, a reduced sizing for our spacing and also the header height. One of the things that we heard before, when you look at this mockup on a much larger screen, is you only see a very small portion of it, right? I mean, like, you're just looking at the top left-hand corner. But when we reduce the size down, it fits a lot better, and it's going to be a better representation on any size screen. So we reduced the header size down from a like 140 or 160 down to 110, and it's still going to have the same graphical weight that we are looking for from the taller one. So we went through and created, with that change, meant we needed to change the spacers throughout the entire system. So that meant in the tables, in the layouts, and the header of the table, everywhere. So all of this is designed to fit together and will automatically line up. So you could add or remove any of these pieces, and mathematically it will all stay aligned. And even when you scale the screen down, it's going to still align. So that's really what we spent a lot of time on this last round. One of the other things we did that I think is important is we added this, just simply added the variable name to the size, so you can see the color, the actual size, and also the variable name, so it makes it easy to implement, which we did not have before. The other thing that we did was worked on the scaling. So again, even with that nav header being 110 pixels, that's still pretty tall. So we were talking about doing like a sticky header. especially when you have a horizontal navigation in the space. So we said, well, what happens when you scroll? There's a lot of solutions for that, but one of the solutions we wanted to consider was scaling some of these items down and then shrinking the nav down. So when we have these Red Hat logos, they're all stacked. They're going to be really tall and they don't fit in the space very well. So we're going to scale it down as an SVG file so it will look crisp no matter what resolution screen that you have. Same thing with the avatar and then changing the alignment. So we could also, it's not limited to just the header. We could do that with the third level nav as well. So Matt Carlton very graciously threw this together really fast where you could kind of see how it functions a little bit, where you're going to see the nav actually scale when you start to scroll. Content's a little sloppy, but the idea is that you're just seeing the nav, or excuse me, the icon change size as well as the avatar, and then it's going to scroll. So that is it for that. I'm going to go really quickly through pagination. So SJ worked on pagination this sprint, and one of the changes are that we're going to have pagination as an option in the table header as well as the table footer. So here you can see its positioning in the table header into the top right. So figuring out how that's going to fit with all of the other elements. And this is going to be an advantage when you have a really long page with a lot of items in it and you don't have to scroll back down, especially when you're filtering through this content. So you can simply see the positioning of that, and then possibly the functionality with a drop down or an additional option with a open field where you can type the page number in, which we still need to work on. But that is pagination. Does anybody have any questions about that? Excellent.
Actually, I got a question for pagination. Is there any benefit to having a jumping back to first or last page for certain paginations? I didn't see that in your mockups.
I'm sorry, cut out there. What was the question?
Sorry. Is there any benefit to having a jumping back to first or last page for pagination? I didn't see it in your mockup.
So we originally mocked it up with all of the functionality that we have now in the current PatternFly, which is what we want to mirror. If we want to add that functionality, we can, but we're going to do that as like an enhancement later. So that way, you know, it'll be parallel to what we have now, and then we can add that as we go.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Thanks, Carl. Okay, we'll jump to CSS, and Andy is up. So welcome, Andy. He's one of our newest team members and also contributing to PatternFly. Very grateful for that. But you want to talk about background image?
Sure. Should be sharing screen, I think, now. So I fixed this random issue with Chrome, a background image clipping issue, where just in Chrome, no other browser, if you resize your window, looking at the background image there, it wouldn't quite fill the entire window for whatever reason. You can see it sort of expands, but it gets kind of clipped and sort of boxed in there. I was a bit slow, but that wasn't behaving correctly. After many hours of sort of trying to figure it out, figured out if you add a width attribute and keep it empty, you can't define dispute 120% or anything. As long as it's totally empty, and you refresh, the issue should go away, where now it fills up the entire window as expected. I don't really know why that's the case, and it was very hard to figure out why that's doing that. Not a lot of documentation on that, but that's that fix. The other thing I did was add Retina image support via media queries to the background image. So here's the Chrome DevTools, and if we change the display pixel resolution from 1 to 2, here's the normal image there at 1. We change to 2, it auto switches to an at 2x image resolution for Retina displays. So that's what I did.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Any questions there?
I put this on the GitHub issue, but I think some of the issues with the background sizing, were they stemming from the image filter we're using? And then if that was the case, why are we using the image filter instead of some kind of overlay? It looks like we're just kind of adding like a black opacity background over it just to keep it darker. Was there a reason we went with image filter instead of just kind of adding an after pseudo element or something similar?
I'm not too familiar with the history of it.
For Andy.
Yeah.
Not for Andy,
Okay.
sorry, for Michael. The idea was that whatever image you put there is going to have enough contrast to support white text. So I guess we can go back to that issue if you want to. But there was also like at the beginning it was an after element with a mask, but then we thought that we don't actually need a mask. We can just colorize the image.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought maybe in just a mask of like a black background with an opacity of 0.4 or whatever would give you the same thing with a little less, and then not require actually having a background SVG to also point to. Because with our React repo and everything, a lot of people are using Webpack or not using Webpack, and getting assets, the more assets we add, the more complicated consuming PatternFly React adds in. So if we can avoid assets when possible, that's great. But if that's a requirement, we'll just work around it. And if that's, I mean, it seems to be working now, so that's fine. I just wanted to see if that was something that was visited, and I just didn't have the history.
We can actually think about our solution, but the reason why we're using that is that because we just don't know which image the user is going to have. It might be like a different image, not ours. So the filter will take like the white pixels and then turn them to a gray that is actually the gray we want. So if we add a layer that is white, it's going to take like a black layer. We don't know the percentage of black we need to actually get to that point.
I gotcha. That's just me. Okay. I did not realize it was going through and doing all of that. That was kind of more of, I didn't know what was going on there. So, okay, that makes sense. It is definitely more than just a black overlay on top there. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Doug, Andres, Andy. Next we have navigation grid from Matt and Elton.
Hello. So I'm going to demo the several different permutations of navigation I have. This is the default list. I'm just gonna tab through each one of these, and then we'll check out how they're all responsive. And this is the expandable nav list, which I assume will be the most used version of the navigation. I included some kind of crufty JavaScript in this just to illustrate how we could handle the collapsing and expanding. So this is the best example to showcase how this all works together. So toggle on the left collapses the sidebar, and each of the links collapses the subnav links. And this is the example of the groups navigation. Example of the simple navigation. I don't know why all of these are rendering poorly. Horizontal navigation in the header. And then this is a little bonus feature that I added, which we'll talk about in just a second. So the navigation by default on desktop obviously is displayed, and then when we shrink our screen, it hides itself, and navigation again appears on the toggle. Same functionality for each of the vertical navigations. Whoops. And then for the horizontal navigation, we use flex to return that down to the bottom of the header, and it scrolls left and right. And this is a little bonus feature. And I don't know, Kyle and I briefly spoke about this. I kind of made some assumptions and just shrank the header based on what I thought that would be a likely design for this. But as you scroll, I know Doug, you just mentioned this, but as you scroll, the content in the main is set to scroll, as well as the content in the sidebar. And we may get rid of that scroll bar. I don't know that yet. And that all collapses and expands and works, I think, as expected. And then we shrink that down to the mobile view. Same thing happens here. Overflow set to scroll. And the overflow of that tertiary navigation is also set to scroll. And that's what I have for the navigation. Does anybody have any questions or want to see anything else? Nope. Okay. Table, responsive table. This is the expandable version of the table list hybrid view. And a couple cool things going on here. One is that when we reduce this down to a mobile device viewport with the labels for each of these is actually a before pseudo element, and it pulls the data attribute from the table data itself and displays itself via grid. So this table data is display set to grid, and then it splits the label and the table data itself. And it seems to work really well. I think we need to do some accessibility testing around that. But from what I can tell from VoiceOver, it's all tabbable and it works pretty well. So, and then the expandable table row, and the expandable table row on top. And these obviously aren't sorting the rows yet, but it's an example of the interactivity that happens when you do sort. And so that's the expandable list. Here's just a standard list, has all the same components, and then here's the compact list. And a cool thing about the tables is that you don't have to set any. The only modifier you have to set to have a kind of a different layout is the compact. So is the compact modifier, which basically just changes the table data and table header paddings. And aside from that, this expandable list just kind of handles itself depending on the table data, the table headers that you include in here. So super flexible to use and really responsive, and it seems to adhere to the design spec pretty well. So that's what I have. Any questions?
It's looking great, Matt.
Thanks.
And Andres is from Buenos Aires. Noticed that it had location, not too sure. So if you're wondering why he's wearing a scarf, because it's cold there. All right. Next up, we have Sarah.
Sarah's
we can't
muted.
hear you. Yeah.
And she's from Massachusetts.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. She's from
Um,
Massachusetts.
Yeah, don't forget to let everyone know your location. I am in Loon Mountain in West Quite freezing. So what I did was a quick reference sheet, and it's available off of this link just on the front page of the workspace right now. It's I did it in Keynote, but generates a PDF, which is what's linked from there. And it's just intended to be just sort of a reference for us as we're developing to, I have a terrible memory, so this is useful to me just to be able to glance and see. It's got, I put on just some general stuff about the blocks and the naming conventions. The modifier classes are still in flux, so there's plenty of room here because those are definitely going to change. There's all the utility classes listed there, and then just a quick reference of the breakpoints and spacers and font sizes and font weights, just so you can glance at them and see what it is as you're going back and forth between mockups and code. And then the colors are listed over on the right. Not that, you know, we should be putting the numbers in, but just to quick reference so it's easy to check that you've got the right one and so forth. And then the last little thing, I just stuck down at the bottom the commit guidelines from the PatternFly 3 site, actually, but I think they're the same. We're using the same conventions for PatternFly Next. So it's manual and it'll have to be updated, but you know, it's just a reference to have handy.
Yeah, this is great. I see that it's associated with the pfnext.com. Is there a way to access this from there?
Right now,
or is the best way to just, oh, I see. Yep. Awesome. Questions on this?
This looks great. Is there a quick reference for PatternFly 3 as well?
Not that I know of.
Somebody willing to make one? Probably not.
Be volunteering.
Not me.
If there's a need, I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a need.
There's
still a need, but I don't know for how long.
I can make note of that. Okay, while I do that, we'll move on to Michael Coker with the linter work.
Hi, I've been working on our style linter. Let me share my screen. This is an open PR. It's number 623 if anyone wants to check it out. So it's not quite finished yet, but have a number of changes in place. If you go to the guidelines page of the PatternFly Next website, you can see our general CSS guidelines, some of the resources that we use as inspiration for our own CSS rules, as well as deviations that we make and PatternFly specific rules. And so this was just an effort to bring our linting guidelines or linter rules more in line with our CSS guidelines, just to keep a check on us as we continue to write CSS, make sure our code looks as close to the specifications as possible and more like one person wrote it instead of a team of however many of us there are. So the main changes with this are to upgrade our stylint, a full version release, adding the stylint SCSS plugin, and then there are a number of changes if you want to review them, but the most notable ones are we no longer allow empty blocks of CSS. Just remove them if you've got an empty block. Where we have some new rules around comments. Comments need an empty line before section and block comments. And then attribute comments, instead of putting the comment above, just put it to the right of the attribute. That's been in our guidelines, just never enforced with the linter, and now that's in place. And then also another general guideline is just don't comment out SCSS. If you need to comment something out, you can just remove it. Or if you must keep it in the document, just move it to the end of the block or something out of the way so it's not in line with the other active rules. We've had a rule to try to keep our nesting depth at 3 levels deep. We'll see how well this works. I have this in place. Sometimes there are going to be exceptions, I imagine, so play that by ear. But that's in place, and currently none of our CSS conflicts with that. It's all online. One of the bigger changes is no more of the BIM style nesting where we construct a single selector with the ampersand in an effort to keep the code a little bit more simple, less nesting, and to keep the code base searchable. Write out the single selector lines, the entire line, instead of constructing them with a parent selector. So ampersand dash and ampersand underscore are no longer allowed patterns in a nested selector. And then classes are now enforced just to start with PF dash. So in the PR, everything's been changed to fall in line with these guidelines. Everything looks okay, so feel free to give it a look if you're interested. That's about it.
Great. Next up, we have Matt Carlton.
Hey guys. Okay, so the stuff that I was working on was mainly form stuff. So the error state and required styles for forms for the form control and just generally for the forms. So if we take a look here in the form control, you can see the different error states that we have for all the different types. And then we look at the form. We have basically the same thing with the helper text. So that's all working now. Required fields as far as like the asterisk with the label and stuff is all in there. And then the other thing that I worked on was, and this is an open PR right now, but icons within inputs. So these are more like actions that are paired with the input. So it's part of the input group, but it's a little bit different than what we have previously with the text. So for example, you could have like a calendar icon, or you could actually have like a button that we have for, say, for tooltips, or like a search field. So this is still kind of being worked on, but it's getting pretty close. And that is it.
Great, thanks, Matt. And that will conclude the CSS portion, so we'll jump into React. We have Amy first up with text input.
Okay, hi everyone. So let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So this sprint, I worked on the text input component for the PatternFly 4 React implementations, and the link to the PR and to this example is in the agenda. So for the input, we're showing a few different states. We have the simple or general text input, the disabled state, which applies the disabled class, the read-only state, which applies the read-only attribute, and the invalid text input, and the alternative text input, which is just an additional alternative class that gets applied. And then underneath, we have the props that the component accepts, the types, if it's required, the defaults and descriptions. So we have our class name is required to show if the input is required, the type of input, which can be any one of these types in the array. The value of the input, if it's disabled, is alt, which will display the alternative class. On change, which is the callback to handle the input value changes, is read only to apply the read only attribute, and the ARIA label, which is a custom type, so the consumer can input their own ARIA label, but we also make sure to send out a warning error in the console. So if there's no ARIA label or ID specified, so that way we're making sure that the ARIA label is being passed to the component for accessibility. And that's it for me. Are there any questions? Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. And
All right. Recently made a change to the docs, which actually you kind of saw a little bit with Amy's PR there. Visually, not much difference, but the structure for writing PatternFly React docs is different now. It also includes a few things. So one example, and this is a very basic component, but with the previous workspace that we had, we were unable to add crop type definitions for or documentation for components that are consisted of multiples. So we've got a header, body, and a footer here, and the card component. So you can see we get actually all of the crop types for those as well. Similar grid and gallery, same thing. The grid and grid items, we also get the different sizes. This is kind of a limitation of the docs generator we're using, but we do get kind of the enums of what you can actually send to each of these spans as well. And then as we add more descriptions, which we do have an issue in the React repo right now to be more descriptive on each of these props, we'll see those here. So the text input you saw was very descriptive and included quite a bit. The button has some descriptions as well, missing a few, but that's kind of coming in the future. So writing this, got too many things open. One big win with this for the React repo was that all of the docs are actually co-located with the component now. And so we can actually just write the docs with it without having to worry about writing GraphQL or anything. So you can kind of give it a title, what components are involved in the docs, and then any of the examples that go with the docs. So here's like the block button example. Each example is also its own separate React component. This is different than the previous version where each example is kind of in its own file. Having these as each separate file gives us the ability to, in the future, it does not, we don't currently have the ability, but this opened up the door for it to include the source for each of these so that down below each of the examples, you can have the source. This also promotes keeping these to be very lightweight and kind of how they're supposed to be used. So similar to this is kind of a guideline we've set as well. Button variants, we could easily iterate over each of these and do it in kind of a more generated fashion, but instead we're actually doing this manually. That way, when we do get the source code, they're actually true to source. Even the imports themselves are how a consumer would actually import the components and use them. This is different than the old PatternFly where we were using Storybook to generate the source examples, and there was a lot of inconsistencies with how you would actually consume the component from a consumer standpoint, how you would use it. And it caused a lot of confusion for people. So this will hopefully remedy that for PatternFly 4, and we won't have that issue. So each of these are as you would use them. We've got each of the different alerts as well for their examples. The examples are just one-to-one. I just copied them over. With that, we also now publish these documentation files. Both with ES6 modules and CommonJS modules to be consumed at core time. So each component has its docs and examples available to somebody trying to pull in React docs. This is going to be used in the website. So the website team will pull down this docs and then in some way iterate over or consume these. That's not really been decided exactly how to consume them yet. But they are available and should give the freedom to consume in any manner needed. And I think that's it for the docs update. Coming soon will be the source code preview below it and more prop types. Right now, we are not actually in these distributed files. We do not actually include the prop type definitions inline here. We do that in our own workspace. But the plan is to include the source and the prompt type definitions alongside here so that the consumer of it does not need to set up any kind of plugins to take advantage of that. These are kind of future work coming. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Dana. And we have about 15 more minutes, about 4 more things to cover. So the first one is guidelines. We're using the Axe tool.
Hey, yeah, so at the last demo, Michael Spaxman reviewed the Axe tooling that he integrated with the Patternfly Next repo and demonstrated how you would use that to flag violations in your contributions. So he and I got together and just worked on drafting up guidelines as far as how you would use that tool and what you should do when you do see violations flagged. And so right now we've just posted this in the issue for that work, but this coming sprint I'll work on actually getting that into the repo somewhere. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And Matt Carano with the pagination update to PatternFly 3. Matt Carano, you might be on mute. Or you might be there. All right, we'll skip to, oh, no, I see a presentation.
Still muted?
We cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. Let me see. So this is a PR that it's currently an open PR, but hopefully will be merged shortly. For PatternFly 3, what we wanted to do is just we've made a lot of changes recently to the toolbar and just making sure we have a consistent approach to the toolbar across different patterns in the library. So the pagination that we have on the site now was terribly out of date. So this is just to bring that up to date. One of the things that we have added here is to optionally put the pagination in the toolbar above the list card or table view, as well as having the pagination in a footer below the table, so that the user has more quick access to the pagination. In order to do that, we're making sure, oops, do that. In order to do that, we're being consistent with always putting the filter results on the left-hand side. So we will be trying to clean up some of the other patterns over the coming weeks where we have a lot of inconsistencies on where those those results are reported currently. Any question? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Great. And then we also have a login update which was triggered by some React development that was going on. And Christy is also a new member of the team and contributing to PatternFly. So welcome, Christy.
Hi guys. So I've been working on a few small issues just to get up to scratch with PatternFly 3 and 4. One of those was working with alerts. So this is the current login basic screen. And then I created a page for when there's an alert notification. So that component sits at the top here. So pretty simple and it's responsive. And page has 20 pixels at the top and 100 pixels of padding at the bottom. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay. And last but not least, Dana.
Yeah, all right, we'll be wicked fast here. Let me find a screen to show. So I've been working on, for a while, just connecting PatternFly to OpenShift. The GitHub, okay, got a green line around it. So we've had a PatternFly React demo app for a while, and we recently introduced a change where we have a .OpenShift.io directory, which includes an OpenShift template and instructions on how to use this here if you want to use OpenShift for it. But our long-term goal is to provide a really quick way to get a PatternFly demo application or a starter application up on OpenShift for people to use. So within OpenShift, if you wanted to use that template, we hope to submit this also to the OpenShift team, so it's part of the default templates. But essentially, you would just go through a quick wizard, and it's also inside the JavaScript area for our category. But the quick wizard where you would select a URL that has a React or an Angular application, it doesn't really matter, it's a single page app. And very quickly, when you click create, it goes through, and I've already done them in here, you'll see an OpenShift application that's created with all of the necessary routing and services to expose it, so it's available. And then what it looks like when it's running is basically our starter application. So it takes about 5 or 6 minutes to deploy this, and then you have a running application that you can hook up through OpenShift and just start with a PatternFly demo. As soon as we have all of the components in place, we hope to provide the same thing for PatternFly 4 with React, with basic, just high-level navigation and a really empty template to get started with, so there's not a lot of code to delete. And then the other thing that this allows for, one reason I like it in OpenShift is a demo I did at DevConf over the weekend, is you can have a PatternFly React demo, and then sitting next to it in another container, I have the PatternFly NG demo app running. And because everything is containerized, they sit behind the same URL, which allows for sharing a security context within the browser. So using the pattern library this way allows for some different sort of interactions with containers and opportunities to innovate on top of that sort of platform. So that's just wanted to show that it's pretty easy to use those, and the directions are in that repo. And if you have questions, obviously reach out on Slack or over email if you want to use something like that for your application. We can help you get set up. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, everyone, for all your work and effort the last couple of weeks. And hope to see everyone at the next demo. And we'll be sending out the recording for this one. But as Dana said, reach out if you have any questions in the meantime. Thanks, everyone.